Welcome to the second installment of How to Destroy a Republic. In the last video, I left off at the end of Step 5. Up to this point, we see that what is now known as critical theory is vital to the implementation of this change in political structure. We also see that diversion is also key. By having the people both distracted and fearful, that allows the ones in power to make subtle changes to our social and political structure. In doing so, they prime the masses for a change to a more class-defined and class-conscious society. And in doing so, it allows the public to become more comfortable with the idea of a ruling class, as long as the public is not educated on their rights, and are more than willing to allow the ruling class to take care of their needs. These next steps are, in a way, even more crucial. Now, with this, keep in mind the part from the last video about explaining the limitations of the Constitution. Okay. I must warn you, this video is going to be a little longer. I may have to stop to get a drink of water or something. Okay. Step 6. But the Grand Nostrum will be a public debt, provided enough of it can be got, and it can be medicated with the proper ingredients. If, by good fortune, a debt be ready at hand, the most is to be made of it. Stretch it, swell it, to the utmost the items will bear. Allow as many extra claims as decency will permit. Assume all the debts of your neighbors. In a word, get as much debt as can be raked and scraped together. And when you have got all you can, advertise for more. And have the debt made as big as possible. The object being accomplished, the next will make it as perpetual as possible. And the next to that, to get it into as few hands as possible. The more effectually to bring this about, modify the debt, complicate it, divide it, subdivide it, subtract it, postpone it. Let there be 1/3 of 2/3, and 2/3 of 1/3, and 2/3 of 2/3. Let there be 3%, 4%, and 6%, and present 6%, and future 6%. To be brief, let the whole be such a mystery that only a few can understand it, and let all possible opportunities and informations fall in the way of these few to clinch their advantage over the many. Alright. Here we go. The Great Deception, the linchpin, will be a public debt. Make it as large and constant as possible. Swell the debt to its absolute limits. Then take on the debt of others. In short, collect as much debt as you can. Now, everybody owes you money. Once you do this, like Bush Jr. and Obama, it needs to be perpetual as possible. Kind of sounds like Obamacare. Then only let a small number of people control it as humanly possible. After that, use accounting tricks to make it as complicated as possible, so that no one can understand what it actually is. Make the recording and reporting of such a clusterfuck that only the people at the very top know what it actually is. And use this knowledge to gain control over the public's financial system. You know, when you hear it in, like, modern language, it doesn't sound as villainy, it just comes off as evil. Anyways, step 7. It must not be forgotten that the members of the legislative body are to have a deep stake in the game. This is an essential point, and happily is attained with no difficulty. A sufficient number, properly disposed, can alternately legislate and speculate and legislate, and buy and sell and buy, until a due portion of the property of their constituents is passed into their hands, to give them an interest against their constituents. And to ensure the part that they are to act. All this, however, must be carried out under the cover of the closest secrecy. And it is particularly lucky that dealings in paper admit of more secrecy than any other. Should a discovery take place, the whole plan may be blown up. Okay. I know I had a pause in there. Modern translation. It is of vital importance that the members of Congress are deeply involved. The good news is this is easily to achieve, since most are corrupt. As long as you have enough members of Congress, both in the House and the Senate, they can take turns proposing and passing bills, while the others are investing in what essentially is a sure thing in the markets and companies that will benefit or be hindered by said bills or soon-to-be laws. The end goal of this is to acquire as much land and resources as possible. This has the effect of putting the elected officials' interest at odds with the interests of the people that elected them. This will also make the legislators involved in the largest land. All the legislators that are involved will become the largest land and stakeholders, as well as the largest employers, as a result of businesses acquired by said members of Congress through their backroom dealings. And once again, secrecy is of the utmost importance. Should the public learn of this, the plan would be ruined and the people may revolt. At this moment, I'm kind of considering revolting as it is. 8. Now, I must warn you, the next 3 sections are fairly lengthy, so try and bear with me here. The way in which a great debt, so constituted and applied, will contribute to the ultimate end in view are both numerous and obvious. The favorite few thus possessed of it, whether within or without the government, will feel the staunchest fealty to it, and will go through thick and thin to support it in all its oppressions and usurpations. Their money will give them consequence and influence, even among those who have been tricked out of it. They will be the readiest materials that can be found for a hereditary aristocratic order. Whenever matters are ripe for one, a great debt will require great taxes. Great taxes, many tax gatherers, and other officers. And all officers are auxiliaries of power. Heavy taxes may produce discontents. These may threaten resistance, and in proportion to this danger, will be the pretense for a standing army to repeal it. A standing army, in its turn, will increase the moral force of the government by means of its appointments, and give it physical force by means of the sword, thus doubly forwarding the main object. Oi! Sorry about that. Some of the way it's worded just got me. Okay. Now to hear it in slightly more modern terms. It is obvious that a public debt that is managed in such a way will have many benefits for those that are politically connected, whether they are directly or indirectly involved with the governmental process. The connected will also be the staunchest supporters of the political elite in this endeavor. Their wealth and involvement will give them influence throughout the process. These will be the greatest allies that can be found for the implementation of an all-powerful political class, when the mood of the public is just right. Of course, a consequence of a great debt will be great taxes, and an army of tax collectors. In comes the IRS. The increase in taxes will make the public unhappy, and when they rebel to some extent, this will be used as an excuse to build a private army for the IRS. The authority of force, being a private army, will increase the perceived legitimacy of the government, as well as providing additional means to coerce the public. Oh God, that just sounds evil. Come to think of it, I don't think the IRS is actually a legal entity. I don't believe the 16th Amendment was ever actually ratified. I think it was pushed through on a Christmas break, similar to what Obama did with the National Labor Relations Board. Just as a side note. 9. The management of a great funded debt and the extensive system of taxes will afford a plea, not to be neglected, for the establishment of a great incorporated bank. The use of such a machine is well understood. If the Constitution, according to its fair meaning, should not authorize it, so much the better. Push it through by a force, meaning and you will get in the bargain of an admirable precedent for future misconstructions. In fashioning the bank, remember that it is to be made particularly instrumental in enriching and aggrandizing the elect few, who are to be called in due session to the honors and felicities of the kingdom preparing for them? And who are the pillars that must support it? It will be easy to throw the benefit entirely into their hands and to make it a solid addition of 50 or 60 or 70% to their former capitals of 800 or 900% without costing them a shilling. While it will be difficult to explain to the people that this gain of the few is at the cost of the many, that the contrary may be boldly and safely pretended. The bank will be pregnant with other important advantages. It will admit the same men to be, at the same time, members of the bank and members of the government. The two institutions will thus be soldered together and made stronger. Money will be put under the direction of the government, and the government under the direction of money. To crown the whole, the bank will have a proper interest in swelling and perpetuating the public debt and public taxes, with all the blessings of both, because its agency and its profits will be extended in exact proportion. And the first time I read that, it kind of confused me a little bit. Here we go. It's going to be broken up a little bit. Alright. In order to manage such a large debt and the taxes that are to be tied to it, a central bank should be created, the Federal Reserve. Since the concept of a central bank goes back centuries, its basic premise is fairly well understood. Since the Constitution does not allow for a central bank, create a crisis. Creating a crisis that will have the public demand such an institution, and as a result of not letting the crisis go to waste, you will set a precedent to be able to circumvent the Constitution again and again as a way to combat each future crisis. When setting up the central bank, once again the Federal Reserve, it is important that it benefits the politically connected that are a part of this grand enterprise, and that they have plenty of public support. They will essentially be able to print themselves money at a ridiculous rate and add to the great wealth without spending $1. While some people will see this and be understandably apprehensive at this consolidation of wealth and power, the politically savvy will be able to calm the masses and put the public's fear to rest by convincing them that it's all for the public's benefit. Now, the two institutions of government and a seemingly private banking enterprise will in fact be one and the same, allowing for the appointment of government officials to head the central bank, like Bernanke at the Federal Reserve, and the central bank will be able to guide the government to be able to grow its own power. This then gives an incentive to the bank to do whatever it can to grow the debt, and using the government to collect the taxes, which in turn pays the bank. Ay. You know, this guy could have been a fortune teller. Ugh. 10. Divide and govern. Ugh, if that doesn't scare you, I don't know what does. All right. Divide and govern is a maxim consecrated by the experience of ages, and should be familiar in its use to every politician as the knife he carries in his pocket. It is the work here to be executed. The best effects may be produced by this maxim, and with peculiar facility. An extensive republic made up of lesser republics necessarily contains various sorts of people distinguished by local and other interests and prejudices. Let the whole group be well examined in all its parts and relations, geographical and political, metaphysical and metaphorical. Let there first be a north and a southern section by a line running east and west, and then an eastern western section by a line running north and south. By a suitable nomenclature and by landholders cultivating different articles that can be discriminated from one another, all from the class of merchants and both from that of manufacturers. One of the subordinate republics may be represented as a commercial state, another as a navigation state, another as a manufacturing state, others as agricultural states. And although the great body of people in each be really agricultural, and the other characters be more or less common to all, still it will be politic to take advantage of such an arrangement. Should the members of the great republic be of different sizes, and subject to little jealousies on that account, another important division will be ready formed to your hand. And again, the division that may be carved out of personal interests, political opinions, and local parties with so convenient an assortment of votes, especially with the help of the marked ones. The majority may be packed for any question and as much ease as the old trick by an adroit gamester, and any measure whatever carried or defended as the great revolution to be brought about may require. It is only necessary, therefore, to recommend that full use be made of the resources, and to remark that, besides the direct benefit to be drawn from these artificial divisions, they will tend to smoother the true and natural ones, existing in all societies, between the few who are always impatient of political equality and the many who can never rise above it, between those who are mount to the prerogatives and those who are to be saddled with the burdens of the hereditary government to be introduced. In a word, between the general masses of people. Attach their republican government and republican interest and chosen band devoted to monarchy and mammon. It is of infinite importance that this distinction should be kept out of sight. The success of the project requires it. Alright. Now, what does it essentially mean to us? Class warfare is a classic tool to all politicians. Politicians are as accustomed to employing class warfare as they are at lying. It is the easiest way to employ this tactic if there are regional and social differences amongst the general population. Study the interactions of the differences and stereotypes within the general population, and exploit their own prejudices. Separate people by where they live, their religious beliefs, political differences. Separate them by north and south, east and west. Turn people against each other by using their chosen profession and making another profession seem as the root of their problems. Point out that another state within the republic has a different means of generating wealth, and generate animosity between them. Use the division of the people to create new districts that, of course, will benefit you politically. This will give you control over your political opponents. Use this to pass only the bills and proposals that will benefit you. You are to exploit these differences and political power derived from the control of the electorate and the convenience of the redrawn district lines. Use the division of the people to gain control over them while praising them and condemning others. Use the passions of those that crave and demand political equality and those that don't care. Drive a wedge between those that benefit from this political arrangement and those that must pay for it. And just as before, secrecy is of the utmost importance. Well, this concludes steps 6 through 10. In this, we see the dangers of a centralized banking system and the corruption of the government, of which the central bank is an extension of. We also see the reason as to why a tax collection agency is needed. At this point, I would like to point out that at this time, all agencies of the government have a military arm, including the Department of Education. I mean, why does the Department of Education need a SWAT team? Check it out, I'm not kidding. As does the National Park Service, and as we all know from recent events, so does the Bureau of Land Management. In the next video, I should stress that there are parts of Step 11 that I'm sure many of you will listen to many times over. I know I did the first time I read this. Also, if I was to focus on specific parts of this article, up to the point where we are at this time, I would take special note of steps 4, 6, 8, and 10. These stand out to me. Well, thank you, and I hope that you'll stay with me for the conclusion of what seems to be the playbook of our politicians over the last 120 years. I don't know if this scares you as much as it did the first time I came across this. But I don't know. This just, it's frightening as to how much of this has actually been employed. Well, thank you, and I apologize for this section being so long.